The file has been sent, but something's off with the French version. No one in the conference room that day thought a single attached document written in French could jeopardize a merger worth hundreds of millions. And even more unthinkable, the person who discovered the critical flaw wasn't the lead attorney, not the project director, not even a legal assistant. It was a janitor, a man so invisible in the company that most didn't know his name. It all began on a Monday morning as BC Holdings prepared to finalize a major merger with a French financial group. Everything was ready: bilingual contracts, triple checked by legal teams, media kits drafted. But at the last minute, the French partner pulled out indefinitely. The reason, certain passages in the French version may significantly misrepresent legal rights. Panic spread through the bank. PR silenced any leaks. The partner's legal team went cold. A crisis meeting was called, and all eyes turned to one name: Hervé Cloze, the French attorney who had overseen the deal for BC Holdings. He denied any fault, blamed the translation team. But the issue wasn't mistranslation. It was language used subtle, ambiguous, deliberate. And someone had caught it. From a discarded printout left in the machine, one question was quietly asked. Who found it first? No one guessed the answer. A janitor, the man who showed up only after everyone else had gone home. Bent shoulders, thick glasses, quietly muttering greetings in French to himself. When the truth surfaced, it wasn't just a contract that had to be re-examined. The credibility of the entire legal team was shaken. And the janitor, once a ghost in the building, was suddenly at the center of it all. Some things hold value not because of title, but because someone quietly noticed what others missed. And sometimes, the biggest quakes start from the smallest cracks. What really happened, and how could a janitor shift the course of an entire corporate merger? So let me walk you back, slowly, to the quiet things they all overlooked. His name was Martin Dupree, mid-50s, average height, slightly hunched shoulders, gray janitor uniform, name tag barely readable. Every morning, he clocked in before sunrise at the downtown branch of BC Holdings long before the suits arrived, before the espresso machines whirred to life. He moved like background noise. Floors gleamed because of him. Trash bins emptied without notice. The office always smelled faintly of lemon and old books. No one ever asked him about the French book he always carried in his back pocket. Most never even made eye contact. But Martin noticed everything. He noticed which junior analyst always forgot their scarf, which executive left passive-aggressive sticky notes in the shared fridge. He saw who stayed late because they loved the work and who stayed late because they were afraid to go home. And most of all, he listened. Sometimes, while scrubbing coffee stains from conference tables, he'd overhear fragments of conversation, legal jargon, financial buzzwords, and the occasional stressed-out whisper. He didn't interrupt. He just stored things away, like chapters in a book only he was reading. What they didn't know, Martin wasn't just a janitor. Decades ago, he had been a legal translator for the EU, fluent in 4 languages. A mistake one made by someone else but blamed on him had cost him his license, his reputation, and nearly his will to live. He left Europe with a suitcase, a second-hand suit, and a resume no one in America cared to read. The job at BC Holdings was supposed to be temporary, just something to pay the bills. But 15 years later, he was still here dusting down boardrooms where billion-dollar deals were whispered into being, where people with crisp accents and louder egos made decisions that changed other people's lives, and sometimes ruined them. No one ever asked what Martin used to be, and maybe that was their first mistake. Sometimes, the smartest person in the room is the one wiping the whiteboard. And sometimes, the cost of being invisible starts with the walls that were never meant to see you. BC Holdings wasn't just any bank. It was the bank's shiny marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and elevator chimes that sang in 5 languages. On the 33rd floor, where most of the legal and executive teams worked, everything gleamed: watch straps, business cards, teeth. The unwritten rules of hierarchy didn't need signs. You could tell who mattered by who got to speak first in a meeting, or who didn't have to carry their own laptop, or who was never asked for ID at the front desk. There were 2 worlds in that building. One climbed stairs in Louboutin and Italian leather, where job titles stretched across 3 lines and people said, "Let's circle back" instead of "I forgot." The other walked past invisible, wearing name tags and silent shoes. Cleaning, refilling, repairing. Not part of the agenda, just background. Martin belonged to the second world. But here's the thing, he saw the first world more clearly than they ever saw him. He saw how junior lawyers tried too hard, stayed too late, and smiled too wide. He noticed the nervous glances exchanged when Klaus entered a room, the way assistants braced themselves before knocking on his office door. Martin had been in rooms like those once. Rooms where power didn't raise its voice, it lowered it. Where one misused word in a different language could shift millions of dollars in months of negotiations. He also understood something else, something most of them didn't. Language is power. But silence can be deadly. And for 15 years, he had stayed silent. Not because he didn't know better, but because the system taught him he didn't matter. Until that day, that small fax page half rolled in the printer tray changed everything. It wasn't just a document, it was a test. A whisper from the past saying they still need you. Even if they don't know it yet. He wasn't just unseen, he was placed there. And sometimes, fluency in 4 languages still isn't loud enough in a city that doesn't ask. Before the mop, before the name tag, before the invisible hours, Martin Dupree was a name that opened doors. He was born in Lyon, France, to a schoolteacher mother and a father who worked nights at a local printing press. Not rich, but rich in words. His mother taught him poetry before arithmetic. His father taught him to love silence. By the time he was 25, Martin spoke 4 languages fluently: French, English, German, and Spanish. He didn't just translate words, he translated nuance. Toning or derma, subtext. The kind of translation that wins or loses court cases. At 28, he joined a legal translation bureau in Brussels, handling high-profile contracts between governments and Fortune 500 companies. He sat at long tables with diplomats, CEOs, attorneys. No one questioned his presence, until one day everything collapsed. It was a minor clause. One word in a 180-page contract translated exactly as written, but interpreted differently by one party. The deal imploded. The company lost millions. And even though Martin had proof he had warned about the ambiguity, someone needed to be blamed. And it was easier to blame the translator than the lawyer who approved it. His license was suspended. His reputation ruined. The French press labeled him careless. His phone stopped ringing. Clients disappeared. His girlfriend left. His confidence shattered. He tried to fight it. For a while, but eventually he stopped. He packed 2 suitcases and moved to the U. A trender cherchait them, and thinking maybe here he could start over. But America didn't want an ex-translator with a tarnished record. Degrees didn't matter. Accents were a liability. And a 38-year-old man applying to be a barista was seen as suspicious. The only place that called back a cleaning service. The company contracted with BC Holdings. They liked that he was quiet, ne punctual, never complained. And so Martin swept floors where he once would have reviewed contracts. Polished windows he used to look out from. Cleaned bathrooms outside boardrooms where decisions like the one that destroyed his career were made in under 30 minutes. It's not that he forgot who he was. It's just the world stopped asking. The routine didn't break loudly. It cracked half a page at a time, and with it, a past that never really left. If a part of this feels close to you, leave a comment. Sometimes one sentence is all it takes to be heard. 15 years. That's how long Martin had been walking the same halls, same floors, same quiet nods at security guards who never remembered his name, only his broom. He knew the exact timing of every motion sensor light, the faint hum of the espresso machine that started 10 minutes too early. He could predict which meeting rooms would be booked just by the tone of emails printed and forgotten on counters. And yet, no one ever asked him how long he'd been here. That's the thing about routine. It becomes camouflage. You stop seeing yourself in the mirror. You just become the motion, the man behind the mop, the shuffle in the hallway. Every day was a loop. Clock in before dawn. Wipe down conference tables. Restock paper trays. Empty bins of shredded ideas and discarded drafts. Lunch alone in the boiler room with a tattered copy of L'Étranger. Sometimes, a young intern would offer a forced smile. Sometimes, no one would. He didn't mind. At least, that's what he told himself. Because silence, if kept long enough, becomes easier than risking voice. But something inside him hadn't fully dimmed. Each time he saw a poorly translated email or overheard broken French in a meeting, a flicker of the old Martin would rise, just for a second, then retreat, until one Tuesday morning, the printer near the East Wing jammed again, second time that week. Martin opened the side panel to unstick the paper, as he'd done dozens of times. But this time, one page fluttered loose, half printed, half crumpled. A contract. In French, you assure no one's sure. The wording stopped him cold, not because of the font or formatting, but because of a phrase, a tiny, dangerous phrase, a legal landmine written in beautiful, misleading prose. And suddenly, the loop broke. The mop paused midair, and the man no one noticed finally saw something no one else had. Some routines die in silence. Others are ended by a single word on a forgotten page. And Martin knew this was no typo. It was 512A, a miscellaneous. The city was still wrapped in a gray hush, the kind that only happens before sunrise. Martin pushed his cart down the east corridor of BC Holdings, past the executive printer station, the one no one else touched but the legal team. He heard it before he saw it. The soft whirring, the stuttering click-click of a jammed feed tray. He paused, sighed. That machine always acted up when the weather shifted. Something about moisture in old toner cartridges. He opened the side panel, reached in, and gently coaxed out the stuck page. It was crumpled at the top, the ink slightly smudged. But even in that imperfect state, his eyes caught a word. Just one, résiliation. Premier termination. Termination. A standard word in legal contracts, sure. But this wasn't a standard phrasing. His translator's mind, though dormant for years, immediately flagged the structure. He smoothed out the page on top of his cleaning cart. The document was bilingual, like most of the bank's international contracts. The English version looked sharp, airtight. But the French, it was elegant, too elegant, cloaked in what seemed like poetic fluency, but one paragraph subtly redefined the terms of early withdrawal penalties. In English, the clause protected both parties. In French, when it leaned dangerously toward the counterparty BC, Holdings stood to lose significantly more than intended. To a casual eye, it would pass. To someone unfamiliar with contractual French, it would look like a faithful mirror. But Martin knew better. This wasn't just a bad translation. It was precise, intentional, weaponized language. His heart beat faster. He glanced around. No one. No one. Just him, the cart, and a contract that could unravel months of negotiations. Martin stood still for a long moment, holding that single page like it weighed more than the building. Should he say something? And would they listen? Would they care? He didn't take the page to the trash. Instead, Martin slid it gently between two folders in his cart, out of sight, but not out of mind. The rest of his shift passed like a dream he wasn't quite awake in. Lights flickered on, coffee brewed, laughter echoed from the break room. But Martin heard none of it. His mind was somewhere else. When his shift ended at 11 a.m., he didn't go straight home. He stopped by a second-hand bookstore off 8th and Clarkson. The owner nodded at him. Martin was a quiet regular. He picked up a French legal dictionary from the used shelf, paid in cash, and left without a word. By 3 p.m., Enhamin etinmimi. He was sitting in his tiny apartment, the page from the printer flattened on his kitchen table. Next to it, a notepad, a fountain pen. In silence. It had been years since he'd worked like this. Translating was once second nature, like breathing. But now, his hands trembled. His vision blurred when he stared too long. But the rhythm came back slowly, sentence by sentence, clause by clause. The more he read, the clearer it became. This was not a mistranslation. It was a strategic manipulation, elegant misdirection, the kind of French that could only be written by someone who understood law and how to hide intent behind style. He began annotating, underlining, writing parallel versions. His handwriting sharpened as his confidence returned. And with every line, a part of him reawakened. Not just the linguist, not just the legal mind, but the man who once believed that clarity could protect people. That truth, if translated properly, could prevent disaster. Somewhere between pages, he paused. This contract had passed through multiple hands. Junior analysts, legal assistance room, the in-house counsel, even Claus himself, the bank's lead attorney. Had no one seen this? Or had they seen it and chosen to look away? The silence of others suddenly felt heavier than his own. And that page, a year one information, it wasn't just paper anymore. It was a loaded gun, and Martin was the only one who saw where it was aimed. By the next morning, Martin had memorized the phrase, En cas de résiliation anticipée, la partie B s'engage à couvrir l'ensemble des coûts liés au préjudice présumé. It sounded harmless, polished, even fair until you realized what it meant. Presumed damages was a slippery slope. It handed full discretion to the counterparty, allowing them to claim losses without evidence. In English, the clause had a line about mutual arbitration. In French, it whispered submission. Martin sat in the boiler room, hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee. His annotated notes lay spread across the table beside a folded copy of the original printout. He stared at it the way someone might stare at a photo of an ex-lover, equal parts longing and warning. This was the kind of clause that cost companies millions. He knew that. He'd lived it. But now came the hardest part. What would he do with it? He could say something. He could slide the paper across someone's desk, clear his throat, point to the underlined lines. And then what? They'd laugh, thank him politely, nod and forget. Or worse, ask how he got it. Accuse him of reading what he shouldn't. Maybe even fire him for stepping out of bounds. He'd seen it before. Whistleblowers weren't celebrated. They were removed quietly. He took a deep breath, looked at his calloused hands. These weren't the hands of a translator anymore. They were hands trained to wipe away messes, not raise alarms. But then he thought of the people this deal would affect. The junior staff who didn't read French. The legal interns who trusted summaries. The partners who assumed the language was just a formality. He thought of what it meant to stay silent. And what it had cost him the last time he did. There's a moment when you stop wondering what could go wrong and start asking what might be made right. And in that moment, Martin stood up, paper in hand, passed behind him. Ready? He didn't go to the top. Martin knew better than that. Instead, he waited until just after 8 when the building buzzed with caffeine and half-read emails. He watched the elevators open on the 33rd floor and followed the stream of tailored suits, keeping his eyes on one familiar face. Amira Patel, junior associate in legal, 3 years in, always carried too many files. She'd once nodded at him in the break room. That was enough. He caught her just outside the copy room. Excuse me, he said, voice even, low. She blinked. Yes, I think there's a problem. Yes, first soon. With the French contract. The merger document. Her expression changed. Cautious. Confused. I'm sorry. Who are you with? Martin extended the folded page. Just read the second clause here. It's not what it seems. She took it reluctantly, eyes skimming the lines. He saw the moment she noticed something, her brow furrowed. She looked up. Where did you get this? I pulled it from the East printer yesterday. It jammed. I read French, Odoti. She hesitated, caught between protocol and curiosity. You're in janitorial. I used to be a legal translator, he said simply. EU Commission. Years ago, it hung in the air, like static before a storm. She didn't smile, didn't dismiss him either. Instead, she looked down again, now slower, more carefully. This doesn't match the English version. Martin nodded. I'll have to talk to my team, she said. You really shouldn't be reading these. Though. I know, he said. But someone needed to. He walked away before she could say anything else. Back to his cart. Back to his routine. But something had shifted. The silence wasn't holding as tight as it used to. Some truths knocked politely. Others slip through the cracks and wait quietly for someone brave enough to look. And once you've seen it, pretending not to becomes its own kind of lie. By noon, the page had made its way to legal. Not officially, not through any formal channel. Just quietly, it passed hand to hand like something delicate, something dangerous. Martin kept working. He mopped the west hallway twice, though it didn't need it. Rearranged a row of chairs that were already aligned. People passed him. No one looked twice. At 3:15, a tall man in a navy suit stopped him near the 28th floor pantry. "You Martin?" he asked. Martin nodded, wiping his hands on his uniform. "Can you come with me?" He was led into a small office. Those were an not quite an interrogation room, but close. Inside sat a woman from HR and another man, someone from legal, older, with tired eyes and a folder in hand. They asked where he got the paper, why he read it, whether anyone else had spoken to him about it. Martin answered plainly, honestly, no embellishment. When he said the words intentional misdirection, the room cooled. The man from legal leaned back. You understand this is highly confidential material. I do, and you're not authorized to interpret or handle legal documents. Martin looked at the table, then at them. That's true. But I didn't interpret. I understood. There was a pause, a long one. Then the HR woman said softly, this really should have been brought up through proper channels. Martin smiled faintly. And if I had a proper title, maybe I would have been heard differently. No one replied to that. They let him go. No threat, no warning. Just silence. But the kind of silence that hums with discomfort. The kind that follows a truth people don't want to name. He walked back to his cart, slower this time. Not angry. Not even afraid. Just succeed. Familiar with how easy it is to disappear in plain sight. He had spoken. And already the air around him felt heavier. Some buildings aren't made of concrete. They're made of perception, of who's allowed to speak and who's expected to clean quietly and not interfere. And when you challenge that, even gently, you become something the system doesn't quite know how to place. 2 days later, the call came in from Paris. Not a call of excitement. Not the celebratory tone everyone had rehearsed for the past 6 months. Just a clipped voice, asking to postpone the signing indefinitely. No explanation. No accusations. Just a delay. Executives exchanged glances. The merger team huddled into impromptu meetings. The word compliance began floating through hallways like a slow leak. Whispers filled the break rooms. Had someone leaked something? Had the French side gotten cold feet? Claus, the senior legal counsel who'd overseen the entire negotiation, shrugged it off. Standard foreign hesitation, he said. They'll come around, but his voice lacked its usual polish. And Amira, the junior associate, watched him more closely now. She'd read the full document again, then twice more. And each time, that single clause pulsed like a bruise. She asked for clarification during a review session. Claus brushed it off. It's just a style, he said. We had a native speaker review it. But he didn't name who. And when she pressed further, the air in the room thinned. Meanwhile, Martin returned to his routine. No one spoke to him about the document. No follow-up. No thank you. But something in the atmosphere had shifted. People nodded now when he passed. Some even used his name. The walls of power hadn't cracked. Not yet. But they were listening, if only barely. That week, the French firm issued a quiet request, a revised legal team, new point of contact, more transparency moving forward. BC Holdings complied. Publicly, they said it was to streamline negotiations. Privately, the legal floor went tense. Claus's office door stayed closed longer than usual. His voice, when it came, was quieter. Martin didn't know the full chain of events. He only saw the way people avoided eye contact, the way silence began to feel heavier than sound. And once, just once, he walked past Claus in the hall. Their eyes met. Not long, not confrontational, just enough. Enough to know that something had landed somewhere it wasn't meant to. And not everything, it turns out, can be swept under the rug. If this part stirred something in you, say it out loud, even if just in a comment. Claus didn't step down. Not officially, but within a week, his name disappeared from internal memos. His assistant began clearing his calendar for personal reasons. The merger press release, once bearing his quote, was quietly edited. In meetings, someone else spoke. Someone with less arrogance, more caution. No one called it what it was, but everyone knew. Legal departments don't implode with headlines, they unravel through controlled reassignments, passive voice emails, and office chairs that never get reassigned. The merger, meanwhile, resumed under stricter terms. French counsel sent over their own translator. Every clause was now reviewed in tandem by two teams. Suddenly, the tone changed. No more assumptions. No more shortcuts. In the background, Martin kept moving. Same halls. Same mop. But people noticed now. Not because he demanded it, he never changed. It was the room that had tilted. Amira passed him one morning by the service elevator. She didn't say much, just met his eyes and nodded. A quiet kind of acknowledgement, the kind that didn't need an audience. Later that day, Martin found a printed copy of the revised contract in the recycling bin, still warm from the printer. He didn't pick it up. Didn't need to. He had already said enough. And for once, it had been heard. Not loudly, not publicly, but heard nonetheless. Some truths don't knock down doors. They just wait until someone opens a window. And sometimes, it only takes a crack. It came in the form of a beige envelope. No name on the front. Just a delivery slip marked internal. It was placed on Martin's cart sometime between 7:00 and 7:20 a.m. While he was wiping down the elevator buttons on the executive floors, inside a letter. Short. Précis, sent a mountain. The firm was offering him a new position, linguistic compliance liaison. Part-time, discreet, flexible hours. No official announcement. Just a signature line and a modest bump in pay. They'd created the role specifically for him. It was framed as gratitude. A bridge between operations and oversight. A gesture, they said, to ensure greater clarity across languages and departments. Martin sat with it for a while, in the same corner of the boiler room where he used to eat lunch alone. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the ink, but because of what it meant. They weren't promoting him. Not really. They were absorbing him, turning his quiet defiance into institutional polish, trying to fold what he did into their system so they'd never be blindsided again. He understood the play. He'd translated these moves before, just in other languages. Still, part of him was tempted, not by the title, but by the idea that maybe, just maybe, this time he could shape something from the inside. He read the letter again, folded it slowly, slipped it back into the envelope. Then he went upstairs. That afternoon, he returned it unsigned. Not out of pride, not out of anger, but something simpler. Some roles are too small for the weight of the truth they're built upon. And some people have already learned what happens when your name gets printed on the wrong line. Would you have taken the offer? Or walked away too? Let me know. I'd really like to hear what you choose. By the end of the month, clause was gone. The firm never said why. No email, no send-off. One morning, his nameplate vanished from the glass wall. Another attorney took his seat at meetings, speaking softer, listening more. In the break room, no one asked where he went. They just poured their coffee slower. But the building remembered. Little things shifted. Review teams doubled their checks. Junior staff started asking questions in 2 languages. Contracts were now printed in full, not summaries. And for the first time, the translations were read, not just signed off. It wasn't dramatic. It was methodical. Like the building exhaled and decided it wanted to know itself better. Martin kept working. He didn't take the liaison role, but something changed anyway. People paused when they saw him now. Some even asked for help with phrasing. Not often, not publicly, but the tone had changed from avoidance to respect, the kind that didn't need to be said aloud. One afternoon, as he emptied a bin beside the legal floor's printer, he saw Amira again. She smiled, nodded, then handed him a folded document. Off the record, she said. Page 12. Tell me if it sounds wrong. He didn't open it right away. He just looked at her, then nodded once. In that moment, Martin realized something. He hadn't changed what the system valued, but he'd quietly shifted what it noticed. And once a system learns to see what it used to overlook, it never truly sees the same way again. The invitation came via email, not through official HR, not from legal, the foreign connection ifurchumernans. It was from someone in strategy forwarded with a brief message. Thought you might have insight on this. Attached was a calendar invite, internal review roundtable, multilingual risk briefing. Martin stared at it for a while. The room number was one he knew well. A floor he'd cleaned 100 times, always before anyone arrived. He didn't RSVP, but on the day of the meeting, at exactly 8:59 Ephraim Mesern, he stood outside the glass door, quietly adjusting his sleeves. Inside, 12 people sat around a polished table. Mid-level execs, legal leads, a language consultant he didn't recognize. The room paused when he entered. No one said a word, but someone shifted a chair to the side, made space. Martin took the seat without apology, without performance. The discussion began. Legal terms, jurisdictional nuance, risk exposure across translation layers. Martin listened, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he understood the value of silence that listens, not hides. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to impress. It was to clarify. A single clause, a single word, one that had derailed the last deal and now sat, repackaged in a new proposal. The room went still. They asked questions. He answered them, not loudly, just clearly. The meeting ended 30 minutes late. Not because of him, because people started to think more slowly. As the room emptied, one director stayed behind and said quietly, no one expected you to show. Martin smiled. That's the only reason I came. He walked out the door the same way he came in, quiet, steady. No badge change. No LinkedIn update. But from that day on, every chair in that room had a different weight. Because once a man with no title sits at your table, every empty seat starts to ask harder questions. It started with a whisper. Someone from facilities told someone in compliance that the janitor had caught a legal flaw before the lawyers did. A week later, it became a hallway anecdote. Did you hear what happened with the merger draft crazy thing? The story mutated, as stories do. In some versions, Martin had been a spy. In others, he was a retired linguist who returned from exile. One executive even joked he must have had ChatGPT in his cart. Martin heard bits of it. He never corrected anyone. He didn't need to because for once, the point of the story wasn't him. It was what people were finally willing to notice. It crossed departments. Contracts were now read aloud in cross-check meetings. New hires in legal were asked what languages they spoke. Even HR quietly updated onboarding materials to include cross-cultural risk training. No one credited Martin publicly. That wasn't how this building worked. But the ripples were there, in every slightly longer pause before someone hit send. And in moments between meetings, people started to linger. A junior developer asked Martin for advice on learning French. Someone from accounting gave him a worn copy of Le Petit Prince and said, "You'll like this." None of it was loud, but it was steady. And it spread not through memos, but murmurs. The way real stories always do, one person at a time, around corners and under breath. Because systems change slowly. But stories move like water. You can't always see them, but you know when the room starts feeling softer, more human. And sometimes all it takes to shift the current is one man refusing to let a page go unread. The second envelope came in navy blue, embossed, personalized to Promeneleris Turnirity Torturnton. This time addressed by name Mr. Martin Dupree, is history Torturn. It was hand-delivered, not slipped onto his cart. A small gesture but precise in intent. Inside was a formal offer. Not liaison, not token. A real position senior advisor, language integrity and risk. It came with office access, full benefits, and a badge that no longer said contractor. The salary wasn't extravagant, but it was dignified, respectful. More than that, it was recognition not just of what he had done, but of what they had almost missed. Martin read it once, Then again, slower. 15 years of silence had not been a mistake. It had been the only language the system spoke to people like him. Until now, when they suddenly remembered he had a voice. He placed the letter beside his coffee cup and looked around the boiler room that had once felt like exile, but now, strangely, felt like his own. The offer was honest, earned, but something in him hesitated. This wasn't just about stepping forward. It was about what came with it, the performance, the compromise, the pressure to become the symbol they needed him to be. Would they really listen more closely or just display him more politely? He folded the letter carefully, slid it into his jacket. Later that evening, as the building emptied, he stood at the edge of the executive floor. Lights low, silence deep. The city blinked beyond the glass, millions of windows, some open, some closed. He didn't say yes, not yet. He just stood there, in the place they had never pictured him belonging. Sometimes the most powerful answer is the one you make them wait for. He turned it down. No press. No final meeting. No symbolic handshake. Just a simple reply typed late at night, saved as a draft for hours before he hit send. Thank you for the offer. I respectfully decline. Please direct the role to someone who needs the door more than I do. He didn't elaborate, didn't owe them a speech. The next morning, Martin clocked in like usual. He finished the shift he'd already started, cleaned every corner, straightened every chair. Then at 11:42 he packed his cart for the last time and returned his badge. No farewell, no round of applause. Just a few silent nods from those who understood. He stepped out into the afternoon sun, a little warmer than usual, and walked down 7th Avenue with nothing but his coat and a paperback in his pocket. Le Petit Prince, the one from accounting. The city felt different. Not louder, just more visible. For 15 years, Martin had lived beneath fluorescent lights and polished glass. Now, every window reflected something truer. Every passerby could have been him or someone who had once been unseen. He stopped at a crosswalk, watched a young intern rush past with a coffee in one hand and panic in her eyes. He smiled, not because he was leaving something behind, but because he was carrying something forward. Some exits don't make noise. They just leave the air a little clearer than before. And that's how you know someone was really here. Martin was gone, but something of him stayed. In the weeks that followed, his name didn't appear on newsletters. No frame photo, no honorary plaque. But on the 33rd floor, a new policy was drafted. All multilingual documents must be reviewed by native readers, regardless of rank. A clause was added to internal training. Clarity across languages is not optional, it's structural integrity. Someone suggested including a case study for onboarding. The room went quiet. Then someone simply said, use the Dupree clause. It wasn't official, but the name stuck. Across teams, people remembered not the specifics, not the wording, but the feeling. That moment when someone they never noticed held up a mirror, and they didn't like what they saw. Amira started a quiet mentorship circle, one that included voices often overlooked: admin staff, mailroom employees, even cafeteria crew. She didn't say it was inspired by Martin. She didn't have to, because his presence had never been about volume. It was about what he saw and made others see. The building moved on, as buildings do. Deals closed, titles shuffled. But somewhere in its bones, something had shifted. A softness in how people paused before assuming, a new weight behind the question, who else should look at this? Martin never tried to fix the system. He just stood still long enough for the cracks to show themselves. And sometimes, the most lasting change doesn't come from breaking things apart, but from making the room just quiet enough to hear what was always missing. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The skyline changed shade. New hires filled desks Martin had once walked past every day. His name faded from memory for some, but not from impact. One Tuesday morning, a junior lawyer printed out a 120-page cross-border draft. She waited beside the machine, just to be sure. As the final page slid out, she noticed a faint smudge, one that blurred a French phrase into ambiguity. She didn't dismiss it, didn't mark it good enough. Instead, She walked it across the floor to a colleague who spoke the language fluently. "It's probably nothing," she said, "but I want to be sure." That colleague raised an eyebrow, read it, and quietly said, "You did the right thing." No one mentioned Martin, but in that moment, he was there somewhere between the paper and the pause. Not as a symbol, not as a lesson to him, but as a reminder that one pair of eyes, open at the right time, can stop a system from slipping into autopilot. And beyond the building, somewhere in the city, Martin kept walking. No title, no trail, just a man who once chose to pay attention and never stopped. He wasn't famous. He wasn't forgotten. He was seen once, and that somehow was enough. Because in a world full of missed pages, he became the one they never skipped again. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, or even just a moment of quiet recognition, take a second to leave a comment. Not for the algorithm, but so that someone else might pause too. And if you believe that some truths don't shout, they unfold slowly, softly, but powerfully. Subscribe to Unveiled Wealth, where we tell stories that don't demand attention, but deserve it. Stories of hidden value, quiet strength, and the human echoes behind every system. Because what's truly valuable isn't always loud, and what's unveiled can't be unseen.